This topic of conversation will likely be contentious, as it might challenge some of your beliefs regarding the current threat level here in the United States of America and what's causing all of these chaotic situations to unfold. However, I am going to back up my assessment here with some historical context to help you understand that the modern American battlefield isn't necessarily what you think it is. But luckily, we are preparing for this, and this is why we're getting ready in the fashion that we are here in this community. But I want to make sure we're all on the same page regarding what's really going on. And of course, if you disagree with my assessment, let me know in the comments down below, because that discourse is likely healthy and can help many of us just open up our perspectives to other ideas we might not have considered. So, what we recently witnessed here in the USA when it comes to these lone wolf attacks that don't necessarily seem like they're connected. They're isolated incidents that don't have the same motives or even the same key players. But regardless, what this is called is engineered opportunity. And this is something that's being used against us and has been used against us for quite some time, but is accelerating, at least in my opinion. So, for example, we just witnessed what happened in Idaho with the firefighter ambush. We also had the New Year's Day New Orleans attack, and we had the Butler, Pennsylvania shooter. Three different incidents with three different lone wolves that were all semi-successful in the sense of creating chaos and destabilization with their attacks, but don't seem like they have any sort of connection. But here's the thing you have to understand, is that these things are being put into place in the sense of opportunity and battlefield preparation so that the pickings are ripe for those who want to take those opportunities. For example, many people will blame things like MK Ultra mind control in the sense of how some of these people are motivated to commit these atrocities. However, MK Ultra and mind control in general was generally considered to be a failure. Now, of course, many of us are going to say, well, how would you really know that? They want to tell us the truth and everything related to that, but it's because it's not necessary at this point in time for it to even work, even if it did. I'm going to explain that to you here in just a second. The same thing can be said about false flags. Right now, they're too hard to hide in the age of information. In fact, anytime something happens, it's accused of being a false flag scenario, whether or not it is, and people would rather err on the side of caution than assume that everything is exactly as we're being reported. So false flags are no longer as effective as they used to be because there's just too much information too easily shared to everyone around the planet. But I want you to consider how these different types of scenarios can unfold in this current environment in the sense of a flag in the false flag equation more or less being planted in plain sight of those who may or may not have motivations, and then its location being broadcast to the entire planet via the internet, and just waiting to see if anybody arrives to capture the flag. And that's more of what we're experiencing right now than at any other point in our history. And this is one of our greatest threats in the current environment because it's unpredictable. In fact, it's so unpredictable that even the planners of these large-scale chaos campaigns aren't even aware of when these things are going to take place or where. Because in all honesty, they don't know if their battlefield preparation will be effective enough to actually lure in the moth to the flame. So it's a lot of waiting and it's a lot of preparation, and there's nothing that's directly done, especially in regards to anything kinetic. Now, the biggest issue here and why this is such a big threat is because this is a precursor to destabilizing events that have happened around the world. These are the types of actions and events that occur before a much larger scenario unfolds, which is why we should be concerned and why we should be preparing in the manner that we are. When I say that, I mean in the sense of the militant farmer, right? Or in the sense of the well-prepared and capable American citizen, not necessarily people who just have cans of tuna in their cabinet. I'm talking about people that could proactively deal with a threat if needed. So, here's an example for you to understand what's kind of going on right now based on similar tactics being used in these other events. In 2010, we had the Arab Spring situation occur, and this event had very similar battlefield preparation to what we're seeing now here in the United States. So first off, it was triggered largely by social media, leveraging inequality, especially economic inequality, and of course the rage of everybody affected by mistreatment and tyrannical regimes and everything else related to that. And those events started to obviously escalate and grow very quickly thanks to social media propagation. And I think we have seen many things here in the United States happen in similar fashion, haven't we? Now, the thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the training and a lot of the resources required for those campaigns to be actually successful were funded by the US, but not directly by the US government, but by US interest groups who just wanted to make sure people who wanted to voice their opinion and fight for freedom around the world had access to the right tools and training and resources to be able to do so. So understand that this is the methodology to remove direct influence from the equation, but still maintain it through third-party systems. Now, that led to massive unrest and upheaval and eventually factional violence and civil war in those regions, especially when you want to talk about different countries like Libya and Syria and, of course, Egypt. And there was a lot of things happening there. And while all this started to happen, the destabilization finally hit its breaking point. The Western nations sat back and waited for regime change. And we saw that happen in countries like Syria and Libya, where things didn't necessarily improve for the better. But these battlefield preparations and opportunities for people who wanted to act upon them led the entire nation into a state of decay to where regime change was possible, right? You understand where I'm going with this. You understand how we can correlate some of these events to what we're witnessing right now in the United States and how it is concerning for us who want to maintain some level of stability here in the country. Now, in case you're getting anything good out of this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. You share this information out so more people can be aware of it. And of course, check out magicprepper.com if you want to support the channel directly, because there's something special there right now that I haven't announced yet, but you could be one of the first to understand what's going on if you want to check it out. So here's the thing. There are bits of information related to things happening here domestically in the past that also allude to the same strategy. Now, the FBI had what was called their COINTELPRO program, which is also known as their counterintelligence program, that lasted from the 1950s to the 1970s, where they used similar tactics to target political and extremist activists here in the country, although these were, in many cases, American citizens who were illegally targeted by the FBI for some of these exact same purposes. And they used things like inserting misinformation or planting evidence or putting all kinds of things into motion, including assassinations of leadership for some of these more fringe organizations, and then watch them fight with each other in order to destroy themselves. And that's a really good correlation of what we're seeing happening here in the United States at this point in time. They didn't have to go in there as FBI agents and just light up the stronghold of the Black Panthers, let's say, for example, in order to accomplish their goal of destroying the organization from within or even from without, in the sense of using other organizations or factions to fight with them to create that destabilizing situation, which is easier to conquer and easier to control thereafter. And this was well documented. And this was illegal in many ways, but still being done to US citizens in the process. And what did they do? The same thing we saw in Arab Spring. They sat back, let them destroy each other, and then dealt with it however they wanted to afterward in the aftermath. So here's some things I want you to consider and be aware of regarding the current American battlefield and things that you need to be aware of and pay attention to and consider while these events are occurring. Because, for example, with the Butler, Pennsylvania shooter, some people will speculate that it was staged. Other people will speculate that he was MK Ultra'd. Other people will speculate that he was hired by another organization or another political group or whatever it might be. But in reality, the most likely situation that's occurring here is what I just explained to you, which is engineered opportunity. The battlefield prep was set. They had a location that was vulnerable to security risks. They had a lack of funding and resources for the necessary security requirements to maintain the safety of their VIP. They also had lots of inflammation in the media regarding the particular candidate in the hopes that it would spur somebody to feel the need to act, as we had the mainstream media as well as many other organizations literally saying somebody needs to do something and making it seem like that person may be hailed as a hero. Everything was put into place. Everything was broadcast about public appearances, schedules, locations, and everything else related to some of these situations. And then we know what happened from there. Hopefully that helped paint the picture. So here's the things that you need you to understand about this current battlefield environment so that you can be a little bit more aware of what's happening, okay? First off, there's no uniforms and there's no clear enemy. In fact, the people who are trying to ensure that these things occur don't care who gets hurt in the process and don't care what side does what in the process. In fact, as long as something happens, it's good for them. And so, even if there is a clear line drawn between one group and another, and even if you support one group over the other, understand that the people who want these bad things to happen don't care which group does what as long as they do something. Okay. The second thing is that information is the weapon. Anything else that happens kinetically thereafter is just a byproduct of the results that they were hoping for. But regardless, the information that's being put out there, as well as that's being fed to certain sources, right? That's what's being weaponized. And I'm not just talking about mainstream media. I'm not just talking about what people are digesting on platforms like X or anything like that. I'm talking about this information is in the deepest, darkest reaches of the internet, and they're trying to get it to the people they think will be most likely to be affected by it. Okay? Now, often, this is one of the things that you might disagree with or not enjoy me saying, but I'm trying my best to be as honest about the situation as I can for you so we can all be on the same page and have a level of clarity regarding this current threat situation. The perpetrators are often victims. Now, what they do is atrocious, and they deserve what they get for doing the things that they're doing. So don't spin my words on that. I'm not defending these psychopaths. What I'm trying to say is that they were pressured into doing the things that they ended up doing because of their either mental state or their susceptibility to outside influence. Regardless of whatever it was, they were pushed with purpose by these entities that want these things to occur to do the thing that they ended up doing. Now, it doesn't forgive them or excuse them for doing the thing. They were still in the wrong and they still deserved whatever it is that they had coming. But regardless, understand it from the perception that these people are victims of this broader scheme, and it gives you some, I guess, additional clarity regarding why they might have done what they did, right? Motive becomes a lot clearer when the motive is being pressured from outside. Now, the desired outcome is also chaos. People will see these things occur, and then they'll say, well, because there wasn't a clear-cut solution that occurred thereafter, clearly it wasn't related to any broader scheme or plan. Because in our minds, especially from a preparedness standpoint, we believe that any plan is drawn up with the idea of it providing a solution at the end, right? A plan to bug out to a certain location is in order to escape an emergency and avoid any type of dangerous scenario, right? That's what plans are for. But for these plans, the desired effect is chaos. So the plan occurs successfully in the sense that it actually instigates somebody to act on one of these unfortunate events. And then anything that happens thereafter, the best possible solution or the best outcome for the people who put these things into place is pure chaos. They don't want it to actually lead to any type of structured scenario. They want it to just make things worse in general. So the other thing, and the reason this works, is because it has a level of predictable instability. Look at Arab Spring. Look at any of these Middle Eastern countries that had sudden regime change with some level of influence, obviously, and understand that the instability that those nations incurred during that period of time was predictable. They knew that it would eventually lead to that outcome, but they knew they had to get the nation to that level of instability before it would be successful. And so that's the main driver here. Predictable instability. How much chaos can we create with these events, and will it actually get us over that edge we need to get to in order to fully destabilize whatever it is we're trying to infiltrate or influence directly? And for nations, obviously it takes a lot. But for certain groups or certain individuals or marginalized groups, it doesn't take as much because it's not on a national level. So you can understand that right now they're just picking apart things one by one. But if they ever want to go national, it'll start looking a lot more like what we've seen in these other countries. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind that kind of helps to give you a visual of how this all works, right, is you don't need a sniper for these types of operations. Hiring the sniper on the grassy knoll is not what we're doing anymore, right? We're past that. Now, you don't need a sniper. What you do need is a stage, right? You need somewhere for them to be. You need a spotlight to highlight that this is where they should be. And then you just need some pressure to push whoever it may be into taking front and center. And that's where we're at right now. This is the modern American battlefield. There are existential threats as well: cyber attacks, infrastructure attacks, issues regarding anything related to how our country functions, whether or not that's in the sense of legal function or whether or not that's in the sense of economic or whatever it might be. All those threats are always there. We also have the existential threats of foreign adversaries and things of that nature, which, by the way, are the ones who are doing these things to us, even if they aren't necessarily foreign. They definitely are not American, okay? So, this is the threat that you're witnessing right now. This is what we're prepared for. This is why we prepare in more ways than just storing food, right? Because it is dangerous and these people are unpredictable. We don't know when the next attack will be. We don't know where it will be, and we don't know who will be affected by it. But we do need to be aware of and understanding of the fact that the pressure will continue until more of these things happen, until they get their desired outcome, which only happens when pure chaos and instability exists. And at that point in time, the only way this has gone in all these other countries around the world is factional violence or civil war. And even then, they still get what they want: regime change or control. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But this is something I wanted to share. I think it's important. I think we need to be on the same page with this. And I think that the speculation of all these other possibilities generally, not always, but generally just distracts us from what's really happening. And if you can think through this lens that I just provided you, you might see that these things are likely a byproduct of this strategy. So, anything else you need from me at all, go to magicprepper.com. Like I said, there's something special there that you might not be aware of yet, but it will be made aware very soon here for everyone. And that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.